Podcast.
We begin the 6th anniversary episode of the John Huff Podcast, sadly, with a lament for Frank the cat, who left us very suddenly and unexpectedly last week after a short illness at nur 7 Jahre alt. 7 years old, and we lost him, and we had no idea that that was coming. It was on Thursday that we had to make the difficult decision. And 5 days before that, he had been what appeared to be perfectly healthy. And what a shock to the system. And it's always just awful. It's just always the friggin' worst when you lose a pet. We've done it several times now. We're collecting quite a little menagerie of boxes of ashes, and we did not see that coming. And I was tempted to say, it's just been a hell of a season of sorrow. You know, that seems really dramatic, but I'm looking back upon the past 8 months and just thinking, WTF, man. My marriage breaking up, and then the election, and then my father died, and now my cat, one of them. And I thought, what an 8 months that's been. But then I realized, you know what? It hasn't really just been 8 months, has it? It's been more like 5 years of just heaviness. All the way back to 2020 and the pandemic and the chaos. And in my case, an anxiety breakdown and the loss of my music career, such as it was, and the direction that I thought life was going, the direction that I think a lot of us thought life was going. Everything changed, really, in March of 2020. And I find it compelling. I released the very first solo episode of this podcast in January of 2020. And then a couple months later, everything changed. And we're here celebrating the 6th anniversary. I finally remembered an anniversary as it was happening. And I just think back to 2019 when I started this. The first episode being released in April of 2019, and how different the world seems now to the world that we were living in then. Now, I've said on this podcast recently that things haven't felt right to me since probably February of 2020. February 2020, I was driving back from Texas with the Sarah Smith trio, Sarah, Ken, and me. You will recall my episode detailing the horrendous bout of food poisoning that I had on that ride home, sitting in the back of a van with music gear stacked all around and even on me, clutching a plastic wastebasket, borrowed, we'll say, from the hotel room. And with my head stuck in it for a lot of that ride home, and Sarah and Ken, God bless them, not being horrified by that, and doing their best to help me out. And that was the last time that things felt normal, kids. The last time that things felt normal, my head was in a bucket driving home with food poisoning from Texas. And so we lose Frank the cat, and it occurs to me that it's been 5 years, really. 5 years of just heavy, heavy feelings. And I've been thinking about grief. What a great celebration this is, isn't it? Aren't we all just feeling the warm cockles? And how do you continue on? You know, there's been a lot that I've had to deal with over the past 8 months. And as I've said, a lot of my being able to cope has been the product of the last 10 years, really, of learning to surrender, learning to deal with ego, learning to have faith in the way things are. And one of the temptations when you are encountering a period of grief, and I've seen people do this with my own eyes, I've seen people whose marriages ended and they dealt very badly with that. And one of the things that they did was try to ignore or work around the feelings. And so you would numb yourself with alcohol or drugs or going out and sleeping with a lot of people. What did the cherry poppin' daddies say? The way to get over someone is to get under someone else. Well, some people take that very, very seriously as a coping mechanism. You know, the pain that they are feeling is so intense, or the shame or the guilt or the fear of the future is so intense, whatever that pain is, whatever the pain point is, instead of surrendering into that and feeling it, they avoid it. And what that does is fester inside of you. And so they do destructive things. They drink too much. They get into bad situations. They make their life worse. And it just leads to a downward spiral. And I've seen that happen. I've seen people numb, avoid, tune out their pain so as to not feel it. And the reality is you just can't do it. All right. That festers inside of you. You push it down on what Bill Burr called the anger shelf or the grief shelf. And you think it's gone, but it's not. It's festering. And it can cause physical dis-ease. And it can cause you to blow up later. And it creates awful things in your life. You know, the hardest thing to do, but ultimately I think the most productive when it comes to grief or sadness is to sit and to feel it. You know, it's the best way to process it, is to sit with it and feel it and allow it and let it pass through you. You know, let it process in a healthy kind of way, as opposed to avoiding it, trying to numb it, sweeping it under the carpet, and it festers. It gets exponentially worse in those circumstances, and it shows up in really, really awful ways, sometimes years down the line. Now I was thinking about Frank the cat. I was thinking about my reaction to what happened. I'm still a little bit in shock. This was not on the radar whatsoever. You do not expect your 7-year-old tomcat to suddenly not be there anymore. And I'm still kind of processing that. But it occurred to me, sometimes eloquent things come to me. And what came into my mind that day, as I was thinking about it all, was that the pain you feel is the tribute you pay them for adding something special to your life. I think that's a healthy way to look at grief. Whatever it is you are grieving, think of that pain as a tribute. You know, whatever it is you've lost or you feel as though you've lost, it's a tribute to the difference that it made. I know not all grief is positive, right? Some grief is a lament for what could have been. In this case, it's a grief and a tribute to what, in my case, a cat brought into your life, or what a relationship brought into your life, or a job. You know, sometimes leaving a job causes grief too. You know, you leave people behind. If you can look at your grief as a tribute, it makes it just a little bit easier to feel, maybe. I'm still working my way through that, and there's been a lot of it. Right? The last 8 months has been just a blow after blow after blow. And I'm pleased to report that I'm still standing, or at least sitting on my drum throne recording this podcast. And I think part of the reason that I've been able to get through is that I've learned to allow, and I've learned to surrender, and I've learned to feel things. You know, it can be a profound experience to just feel that grief and sit with it. Even if you feel like you can't go on, even if you feel like it is just too damn much, you have the resilience and you can get through, and there are positive ways to frame it. Not Pollyanna ways to frame it, all right? That is another way of avoiding, right? It's all for the best, and it usually is for the best in some way, or at least you can cope. But to avoid it by kind of happy washing it, I don't know. I'm not really sure what I'm trying to articulate here. Sitting it and feeling it, as awful as it feels, is the fastest way through it. And if you can treat it as a kind of tribute, in some ways that makes it more endurable. And so a lament for Frank the cat. It's just a weird and shocking and awful feeling. But, you know, 7 years, we gave him the best home we could, and in the end, we made the best decision we could for him. And it is bloody awful, and it makes you not want to have a pet. It makes you not want to have a pet because you know that's coming, and it's one of the curses of being human. You can predict certain futures, and you know it's coming, and it's a lousy feeling. It doesn't make for a great celebration, but I felt obligated just to pay some tribute to Frank the cat. And it is the 6th anniversary episode. I started this thing in 2019, and I never quite know how to do anniversary episodes. Like, I'm not going to do a greatest hits here. I'm not combing through 218 episodes and giving you the highlights. And I want to do something productive. And so, in a certain sense, I'm continuing on with last week's Q&A because I referenced a question I got, one of the several I got from our old friend Carly Thomas. And her question had to do with how do you focus and how do you get something off the ground? She did not specify what she might be talking about getting off the ground, but I think if I approach those questions within the context of a 6-year retrospective on this podcast, maybe I can offer you something useful, Focus is difficult. Focus is difficult for a lot of people, especially artists. There's a certain self-applied pressure that comes with being an artist and trying to get a project off the ground. There's a lot of personal stuff attached to it. And so I understand if a creative like Carly struggles with a project because a lot of times we have our identity wrapped up in it. And so I've been contemplating this notion of how do you focus and how do you actually get something off the ground? And I think the place to begin is to understand why it is you're not focused in the first place. The first step is to admit you have a problem, and the problem is I can't focus. Now, I don't have the context for Carly's question. I don't know what she's trying to get off the ground or what she's up against, but as a general rule, if you're having trouble getting down to focusing, in a lot of cases, I think the problem is probably fear. You most likely have a fear of failing. Especially this is a tough one for a creative because, as I said, for a lot of creative people, their creative output is tied to their identity. I had this problem as a fiction writer. I was unable to separate my value from the product I was creating. It was my identity. I am a fiction writer. And it was, for a period of time, like a decade, my ever-loving dream to be a fiction writer and to be a published writer and to make a career as a writer. And I've detailed in the past how mentally I went off the rails with that, and I was not mature enough to handle that. But as a creative, you can become tied up in this dream that you've got and in this output that you create. And so you fear failing that, because if this is your dream and this is your identity, what does it mean for you if you fail, right? What does it mean for you if you don't get around to producing or succeeding in the way you define success at this thing that is your dream? I mean, what is the point of life if you fail at that dream? Like, a lot of people pay incredible lip service to the notion of the dream that they have. I'm going to write a book someday. I'm going to start painting again someday. I'm going to do this or that someday. I'm going to write an album someday. And that's a really great way of deflecting. That is a really great way of holding on to this dream without any great risk of failing at it, because you can't fail if you don't try. At least superficially, but we all know that not trying is the greatest failure of all. And so sometimes people can't focus because they fear, subconsciously, maybe even consciously, they fear failing at the thing. And that thing is their identity. Their value is wrapped up in being able to do that thing. And so it's a great way of not failing to not do it at all. And one of the great ways of not doing it all is not being able to focus on it. And you have to ask yourself this question. If I can't focus, if I am consistently unable to just narrow my focus on a thing and get down to it or decide what I even want to do, that is what my therapist would call the churn. And you have to ask yourself, what service is the churn providing for you? Because we don't do things that don't provide some service to us, even if the service would seem to be not helpful. By churning, by not deciding to do something, you are not able to fail at it, at least superficially. And one of the great things about a churn is that it keeps you from putting yourself out there and finding out you're not good enough or it not working out the way you want to. This failure stabs a knife in the heart of your identity, and that is self-preservation. So if you are a person out there and you just feel like you cannot focus and you cannot get down to it, ask yourself, what is this churn doing? What is it protecting me from? How is it serving me? And are you fearing failing at it? And if you are, you have to ask yourself to what extent your art or your creation or your productivity is tied to your identity and your sense of value. And if it is, you need to learn to separate that. Otherwise, you will continue churning because you will just be protecting yourself from failing. But what if it's not that? What if it's you're afraid to succeed? And sometimes when you present that notion, people laugh their heads off. Like, why on earth would I be afraid to succeed at the thing? It's my greatest dream. It's all I ever wanted. Sure, consciously. But what about unconsciously? Because success sounds great. Okay? Egoically, it sounds amazing. But what does success bring? However you define success, and that's another thing that you need to contemplate. How are you defining success? Are you an artist, a music artist, songwriter, and success to you is a platinum record? And so you are afraid to try because you don't think you can achieve a platinum record? Maybe you're setting the standard just a little bit too high, man. Evaluate how you define success, and is that impeding you in some way? Does it seem too friggin' daunting? But what can success bring? I mean, if you really smash as a singer-songwriter and you write an album that blows up, what does that mean? Well, it means all sorts of attention, doesn't it? And up to a point, you say, well, the attention, that's great. That's what I want. My ego loves that. But is there a fear attached to that? Is being too exposed one of the consequences of success? And especially if you are an artist who is maybe a little bit introspective, a little bit not super outgoing. If you are an introvert and you don't want that kind of attention on you, all of a sudden being successful in whatever it is you're trying to do might bring you a lot of attention that's intimidating or even frightening. Or does being successful just add to the pressure you're already putting on yourself? It's like, I made this thing and it's really good. What if I can't recreate that? What if I can't top that? What if I can't reach that level of magic again? That kind of success scares me into thinking it'll just be an accident or be perceived as an accident, or I'm a one-hit wonder, or I'm a one-off and I can't reproduce it. I mean, that is 100% an ego reaction. I mean, a lot of this lack of focus comes down to ego, I think. You are not allowing, you are not slipping into that spiritual side of you through which all of this stuff expresses. One of the reasons people can't focus is because they're coming at it from an ego place rather than a spiritual place where stuff flows. What else can success do? Well, success can make people around you jealous. People can become alienated from you when all of a sudden you're successful. There's an episode of Seinfeld where Jerry had just come back from doing a gig someplace and he had received the most money he'd ever been paid, and Kramer is hounding him. Like, how much did you get paid? How much did you get paid? I don't want to tell you. I don't want to talk about it. Come on, show me. So Jerry shows Kramer the check, and Kramer's eyes fall out of his head. He's like, I didn't know you made that kind of money. Geez, you're rich. I don't think we can be friends anymore, right? People can become jealous and alienated by your success, especially if the people in your circle are trying to do or have in the past tried to do what you're doing, right? And a lot of people can have their egos really chafed by that. And one of the great fears that humanity has is being ostracized from the group, right? That's why we have morality, because the people who do immoral things upset the group. And so we have our laws and our rules and our morality around how you participate in the group. And you better follow that or you're going to be ostracized. And so it's a deeply embedded biological fear. And isolation meant certain death back in the day. Back in the hunter-gatherer days, being isolated meant you are food for coyotes. So that's deeply biologically embedded in you to fear being ostracized. And will your success isolate you from the group? That's a possibility. And so sometimes people hide themselves for that reason. They hide themselves because they don't want the attention. They hide themselves because they don't want to alienate the people around them who might be jealous of the success they've had, or they might feel guilty. They might feel guilty having success when somebody else who's in the same racket didn't. And they can be very self-conscious about that. And so a fear of success can contribute all of this stuff. Too much attention, too much pressure, too much jealousy possibly from the people around you. And so you ask yourself, are you afraid to succeed? By whatever metric you might have for success. And it's worth inquiring into that. Am I afraid to be too visible? I have had that problem in the past, especially during the anxiety when the reality I was living in was not the reality of the real world. And there was all sorts of this crazy pandemic stuff happening and George Floyd and anger and riots. And it felt as though the fabric of civilization was tearing apart. I had a fear for my own safety as part of my anxiety. And so being too visible might make you a target. That was running through my head during the anxiety, and I've wrestled with that at times myself. Do I want to put myself out there because I don't want to draw people's attention? I don't want to draw people's rage or anger, Sometimes being successful will just draw jealous people out to attack you. If you've ever had a modicum of success or visibility on social media, it doesn't take very long for the haters to appear. Doesn't take very long for the trolls to appear. And then all of a sudden you're in this place where you're being attacked. And people who become successful overnight, especially these days where they can be attacked instantly and very publicly, a lot of them really, really struggle. Overnight success all of a sudden puts people in an overwhelming spotlight and they get bloody attacked, and they are not prepared for that. They have not come up through whatever ranks there are, suffering the slings and arrows along the way in order to be prepared to handle that, in order to develop that thick skin. You're an overnight success, your skin is probably pretty thin and the arrows pierce right through you. And maybe subconsciously a person can fear that. And so they don't focus on a thing because subconsciously they're afraid if the thing works, they might be threatened. And that's a legit thing, and it's something to be inquired into. But maybe it's not that. Maybe it's not a fear situation at all. Maybe it's a question of know-how. Maybe it's simply a question of know-how. Like there's this thing I want to do. You're an artist, let's say, independent artist, and you want to book a tour. Okay. Terrific. That's a great goal to have. That's a great thing to focus on, but you just can't quite get yourself down to it because you don't know how to do it. That was one of the things that held me back from podcasting when I began this thing. I had podcasting on my radar for years, long before I ever actually did it. I had it in my head to try to do it, and I had a couple of things working against me. One was I knew that whatever I decided to do with this podcast, it would be way more work than I thought. And I knew this from experience, right? I've had several different blogs. They always wound up just demanding way more of my time and energy than I expected. Because I'm not a person who likes to half-ass things. I like to do it right. And so I would pour myself into these things. And all of a sudden, they would just be taking all of my time and not producing the kind of results I wanted. And it would just become a struggle. And by the time it came around to actually getting on with a podcast, I sat there for years thinking about it, thinking, I just don't have the capacity because I know this is going to demand more of me than I really have time to give or have the energy to give. And along with that, I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how to do this process of recording and making it sound good, and then editing all of that into a package. And then how do you even publish this? There was a very steep, for me, technological learning curve. And whatever it is you're trying to do that you can't focus on, maybe that's part of it. It's like there's a learning curve here. I don't know how to do this thing very well, and it's stopping me in my tracks. It's overwhelming to think about it because there's so much for me to learn, and I don't know how, and I don't know what to do, and I feel silly, and it's too much, and I'm not cut out for this. And so you don't focus. You kind of ping pong around. Maybe I will, maybe I won't, or maybe I'll look at this other thing. When deep down inside, there's a thing you want to do. But ask yourself, am I not focusing because I know that there's a lot I need to learn and it's going to be hard for me to do? And in those circumstances, you've got a couple of options, okay? I had these options when I started the podcast and I didn't really know how to do the tech side of things. One option, if you've got the budget, is to just pay somebody to do it. All these high level, for the most part, all of these high level podcasters with the slick shows and all the production, the podcaster's not doing that. Mark Maron is not editing his own show. Mark Maron is not booking his own guests. As far as I know, he's got a producer. He's got a team. Everybody at that level has got a team. And even people at my level, in some cases, if they have the money, have a team too. So I could have hired somebody to produce my show. All right, help me with the editing in particular. You can send that off and have it done. I could have hired somebody to handle the mechanical side of things, to handle the marketing side of things. I opted not to do that because I didn't want to spend my money on that if I could do it myself. And so in my case, I had to friggin' learn. I had to start at the beginning, as you should with any project. How do I capture audio? And so I had to go figure that out. And at the time I was doing interviews. It was like, okay, how do I capture an in-person interview? Okay, I figured it out. You get a Zoom recorder with a couple of channels. You get a couple microphones. Okay, you can record into the Zoom. You get yourself a reasonably good raw audio product. Fabulous. What do I do if I'm doing this online? This was 2019. The pandemic hadn't happened. Zoom hadn't blown up into the sort of everyday tool that we use now. How do I do this? I was actually using Skype. Eventually, I went on the YouTube and I figured out how to record Skype 2 channels into my recorder. Okay. And I trialed that and I worked with it. Great. How do I edit this? How do I turn this into something that sounds reasonably good? That was the hardest part of all, probably, because I'm not a software person. I am not an audio engineer. I said in the last episode, I don't enjoy that end of the business. If I'm in a recording studio, I'm there to play the drums. I'm not there to engineer it. I'm not there to mic it. I'm not there to mix it. I don't enjoy that stuff. A lot of drummers do. I should probably try to get a little bit more knowledge about that, but it's not my game. All right. The tech stuff is not my game. So it was with the podcast. It's like, I don't know how to do this. And so you go ask people. People want to help you for the most part. So I went to our old friend, Denny Goche, who is an audio engineer. It's like, Denny, how do I do this? And then he gave me some tips. I chose to use Audacity as my audio editing software because it's free and it's robust enough to handle the project. Denny, help. What are these tools? What are these plugins? What do I need to do to this audio to make it presentable? And he showed me. And then I went to my pal Seamus Evely, former host of the Drum Gab and Drumeo Gab podcasts, who produced a really, really good sounding show. It's like, Seamus, help. What are your tips? Show me how to make the audio work. And then I was on YouTube learning about EQ and compression and normalization and noise reduction, noise gates, all of this stuff that goes into making this podcast sound good enough at least to be published. And so I went and I asked people for help. So if you're out there and you've got this thing you want to do that you can't focus on, and the reason you can't focus on it is because you don't quite know how to do it, talk to people who know how to do it. People want to help you, man. Offer to buy them coffee. If you're booking your own tour and you don't know how, speak to somebody who has booked their own tour. I promise you, you know somebody who can help. Or you can even just put that on the internet, put it on social media. Hey, I need help with indie booking a tour. Can somebody give me some pointers? And people will pop up and do that. And again, it's the same sort of thing. If you've got the cash, you can pay somebody to book your tour for you. And God bless those people for the 15 or 20% they take, whatever it is. Like, get help if you need it and ask people if you need it. And then sometimes you just got to roll up your sleeves and go on the YouTube. And here's the thing. What a boost you get. What a boost you get when you're not focusing because you don't know how to do the thing and you're intimidated by it. What a boost you get when you actually begin to start figuring it out. And what a sense of confidence comes when you start to get a little know-how and you begin to work on things. And you feel as though you're taming this beast. That gives you a huge surge, man. And if you're in this place where you just don't want to do this stuff, right? If that's the issue, then, and you don't want to pay somebody to do it for you, I think the thing to do is just to set little goals for yourself. I don't want to book the tour. I don't like pitching myself to venues and booking agents. Okay. Don't feel as though you've got to book 50 dates on Tuesday. Give yourself a little time frame. Say, okay, I'm going to reach out to one venue a day this week. That's it. All right. One venue a day. You do it. It takes 10 minutes. You do it Tuesday morning over your coffee, and then it's done for the day. You've made an accomplishment. You begin to generate that momentum. And then after a few weeks, you've reached out to 15, maybe 20 venues. And all of a sudden, that tour, you might have responses from half of them. And all of a sudden, maybe things are taking shape and you realize it's not as intimidating as you thought. And you're getting somewhere. Or if you're picking up an instrument again and you're reluctant or whatever, 15 minutes a day, right? Or if you're into this thing you don't quite understand, set just a little goal every day to work on it. And over time, it accumulates. So it is with this podcast. I didn't sit down in 2019 to release the first one and say, oh man, how am I going to do 219 episodes of this podcast? You just collapse. It's overwhelming. But you can do one. You can do one episode and then next week do another one. So it is. You can reach out to one venue today and then another one tomorrow, right? If you don't want to do the thing because you're intimidated, you don't know how or whatever, you just don't like that end of the business, just set little goals. Or if you can enlist a sibling or a friend who wants to help, bring them in and let them help. All right. Don't feel as though you have to do everything by yourself. So maybe you don't know how to do it, and that's why you're not focusing, because the learning curve is too steep. So break it down to the very basics. All right. What is the first thing I don't understand about this? Okay. Learn about that. Ask somebody about that. All right. Get that little bit of nugget. That's one little building block. All right. It might be a huge project you're tackling, and that's intimidating. Don't think of it as a huge project. Think of it as one little piece of it, right? And that will help you focus because you'll figure out one little bit and you'll be working on it. And you'll feel like, okay, I'm doing it. I'm working on the thing. Okay. And you can generate quite a lot of momentum from that. Okay. Fear of failure, fear of success, not really knowing how to do the thing or not wanting to do that particular end of the thing that doesn't appeal to you. Here are some options for mitigating that. Some inquiry into your motivations, some inquiry into your fears, and then a little bit of accumulating some momentum. And if none of that's the issue, and you're categorically aware that none of that's the issue, two other things. A, maybe it's not the right time, especially for you creative types. You know as well as I do that there is a season for creation. There are some times when you are just in that flow and it wants to come through you. Remember, take your ego out of this. You are the conduit for the art. Okay, you are the conduit for whatever comes out of you. It is not yours. It is not of you. It is from that peculiar ether where all this stuff lives. Your job is to be the conduit for that. Back when I was writing and writing successfully, at least in terms of turning out work, I was not using my head at all. All right. I was just sitting down for my writing sessions and stuff would come out. And then a couple weeks later, I would be reading this accumulated work and I'd be like, I have no memory of writing this. I have no memory of these words. My writing dried up when I started trying to have memory of these words. Okay. I stopped being a conduit for this work and tried from my head to write this work. Your head comes in editing, all right? But the creative process, that is all conduit. Okay. So don't lose sight of that. And it comes and goes in time. Now, I know Stephen Pressfield in The War of Art will say you have to sit down every day, all right? You cannot wait for the muse. You sit down and she will show up. And in some cases, that's true, all right? There are times when you can muscle this out. But you also know as well as I do that there are times when it's just not there. And sometimes one of the reasons you can't focus is because that is the spiritual, creative side of you telling you it's not time. The time of figs is not yet, right? And you just become more and more frustrated if you try to force yourself to do the work in those circumstances. And in a lot of cases, the work you produce will not be good. And that will make you just feel worse. That will make you question even more your talent or ability. It's a vicious cycle, man. You force yourself to do the work. You don't feel good about it. The work's not good. Then it comes back around to, I'm not very good. See? Well, no, you're trying to force it. Sometimes what life is asking you to do, all right, I've used this kind of parameter before. What is life asking of you? Well, I can't focus on this thing I want to do. I can't seem to make myself do it. That's a red flag right there, making yourself do it. There's no flow. And the reason there's no flow is because it's just not time. Either the work is not ready or subconsciously you're just not prepared yet. And you got to let it perk a little bit. And that can be the hardest thing to do, especially if you are an artist who's not producing work. Heaven help us all. Being an artist who's not producing work is an awful, awful predicament to be in, especially if you have not reached a level where you recognize the timing of these things. And so if you're a little bit more savvy, you can say, it's just not coming to me right now. I'm going to step away. It doesn't mean I'm not an artist. It doesn't mean I'm not capable. It doesn't mean. All it means is that my creative gift is just juicing up a little bit, right? The well needs to be just refilled a little bit. And that can take a week. It can take 6 months. I don't know. But it's got to be something that you recognize as being part of the process. One of the reasons you can't focus maybe sometimes is because whatever it is you're trying to do, it's just not there. It's just not ready yet. And okay. So you have to contemplate if maybe that's what's going on. Right? The well is just a little bit dry. Or, and this is the toughest one, maybe you can't focus and begin to get this thing off the ground because you don't actually want to do it. How much of what we do we do because we feel as though we have to? Right? That was me with writing towards the end, sitting down at the desk and half blowing my own brains out because nothing was coming. But I'm a writer and I have to do this. And it's like, this isn't fun for me. When I was producing work, it was fun. Couldn't wait to get to the desk. Couldn't wait with childlike wonder to see what would come out, what would come through my fingertips. By the end, it was a bloody torture. And it's like, I don't even want to do this. And so if you can't focus on this thing, whatever it is you feel like you can't seem to get off the ground, have an honest discussion with yourself about whether you actually want to do that. Is it fun? Right? Like the things that you're really destined for, the things that are really yours. It's not always fun, right? The creative work can be frustrating and difficult and grinding and grueling, but it comes through, right? There is a flow to it. And it's something you want to do. Like I think about this with the podcast all the time. One of the other kind of caveats to keep in mind is not to ignore those things that won't go away. Now, I wrestled with doing a podcast for years, quite literally. I wrestled for years with doing a podcast, and I had reasons that I've already outlined a little bit as to why I avoided doing it. It's going to be way too much work, and I knew it. and I didn't understand the tech curve, and there was a lot of intimidating stuff there, but it never went away, right? It never quite went away. It kept recurring. And then I did a pilot for a campus radio show because there's something about broadcasting that really appeals to me. I loved AM talk radio, and I wanted to do something like that, especially after my music blog just became too much. It's like, well, let's translate this to the airwaves. And I did a pilot for the London Groove Machine radio show with my pal Howie, and we submitted it to campus radio, and the director loved it and opted not to use it, opted not to make the show because they wanted student voices on the air. And so, okay, that was disappointing. But then back to this idea of a podcast. It just never quite went away. And that's an encouraging thing. All right. Be encouraged by, for whatever reason, you can't focus and you can't seem to get started on this thing that you want to do. And you don't know why, and it's frustrating. But be encouraged if it's a thing that's not going away, right? If it's a thing that's still hanging around, still in the back of your mind, it still comes up to you, be encouraged, because that's usually a sign that there's something in it. Now, the timing might not be yet, or some of these other subconscious fear things are going on that you have to reckon with, or there's a learning curve that you're intimidated by. Okay, that stuff can be handled, all right? There are processes for that. It takes a little bit of diligence, but if it's not going away, that's an encouraging sign, all right? I think the stuff that's meant for you is like that. It just doesn't quite go away. I haven't had the impulse to write a piece of fiction in 15 years. It might have gone away. You know what I mean? Podcasts hung around. And then the circumstances came in 2019 that kind of tipped me over the edge. The London Groove Machine radio show didn't get picked up. And then I kept experiencing this awful tour come down. I was dedicating myself to being a hired player, and that's a precarious thing. I've talked about it at length on this show. You know, if you're a hired player, you depend on people to hire you, and those are precarious jobs, man. You are in, you are out. It is very uncertain. It is very unstable. I found myself coming back from tours and having nothing on my calendar and being frustrated and worried about the finances, and then not getting gigs or getting let go from gigs or gigs that just stopped because the artist stopped. I mean, this sort of stuff happens all the time. And it's a roller coaster, man. And I was having these pretty deep depressions, especially coming back from tour. Having tour come downs where for a month or 6 weeks, you're actually living the dream and everything actually feels possible. All this stuff that you really, really wanted is happening. And it's like, oh, wow, we're doing it. This is possible. This is life now. And then coming home and not having gigs booked or, you know, just all the stuff that goes with being a side player. And the instant fear that comes with, okay, I'm back. I need to make money and I don't have gigs. And the depression that would follow. It's like you're so close and yet so far. And I couldn't quite get my schedule going to the point where I was busy enough all the time to really make a go of it. And so I would be having these come downs, and I would see artists that I was playing with going off doing solo shows or solo tours or duo tours, stuff that I wasn't a part of for whatever reason. And it was really depressing. It was really depressing to feel so close and yet so far. And so I decided a couple of things. A, I need a project that I can dedicate myself to as a distraction from that come down and that depression. And B, I need something that I can't be fired from. I need something that doesn't depend on somebody else to hire me. I need something that is my own, that I can nurture, that I can cultivate, that I can pour my energy into when it's not being dedicated to an artist out there. And the podcast never quite went away. And when the time was right, or at least close enough to being right, I plunged myself in, all right? And I had to reckon with all of these things that I've talked about. Sometimes you just need the circumstances, you know? Sometimes the time of figs is just not yet. And if you can't focus on a thing, maybe that's it. Maybe your flow is just not there. Maybe life circumstances are just not quite right. Now, be very careful about that, though. All right? Be very careful about waiting for the perfect time. There is a certain amount of savvy that has to be required to recognize when you're using all of this stuff as an excuse. And I can't answer that for anybody. I mean, only you can answer why it is you're not focusing. These are some ideas about what could be the cause. Assuming that you've actually nailed down something you want to do in the first place. I mean, if you haven't even done that, then it opens up a whole other can of subconscious worms to be reckoned with. But if you got a thing that you know you want to do and you just can't seem to get down to doing it, question where there's fear attached to it. All right. Question whether it's just a learning curve thing. Question whether maybe the time is not, maybe just your spirit is not quite ready for it, especially you creatives. Question whether it's something you actually want to do. Is it fun for you? I mean, do you feel any energy around this? And if you don't, you've got to inquire into that. And that's a very bloody hard thing to do, especially if you've pinned your identity on this thing. Ho-ho! I'm going to be a fiction writer. That's my dream, and that's what I'm here to do. I'm not writing, and I don't want to write. Wow, talk about an identity collapse. And if you're working from an egoic place, that's a stab in the heart, man. That is a knife in the gut. This thing that you've pinned your identity on, you don't even want to do. Now what? Boy, you can churn a lot. You can churn a lot avoiding that question and avoiding that realization and avoiding that reality. Remember what I said, when you're churning, the dream is still alive. You can't fail at what you don't try. And so there's all of these reasons, why you may not be able to focus and get down to a thing. My recommendation is, all right, if you have worked through some of this stuff and you realize what's going on, don't try to do 219 or 218 episodes at once. One of the best things you can do when you decided to get down to brass tacks and do a thing is to chunk it. All right. You do not write an album. You write a song. You maybe even just write the introduction to a song, and that's what your focus is. And then you build on that tomorrow. You dedicate 15 minutes today to working on a song. That's it. Okay. Feel good about it. Get a little momentum going. And then over time, hopefully the pump gets primed and the flow begins to happen. Then all of a sudden you're spending 4, 5, 6 hours a day working on the music, and it's really growing, and the time is right. The time of figs has come, and you reap, right? But don't try to write the whole album today. Take it all in chunks. If it's a learning curve, take it in chunks. I had to do that with the podcast. All right. How do I record? Okay. Focus on that. How do I did that. I got the audio. Great. How do I use this bewildering software called Audacity? Okay. You focus in on that. Got it. Okay, cool. How do I publish this? How do you get this on the internet? Okay. Go figure that out. I use a service called Liberated Syndication. It's one of the big podcast platforms. Oh, they do it. I pay them money every month. They distribute my podcast for me. Okay, how do I use that software? Okay, that's cool. That's good. How do I market this thing? And that trial and error continues to this day, 6 years later. I didn't say, how do I make 219 episodes of a podcast? No. 999. Chunk it out. Okay, whatever it is you're working on, whether it's an album or a painting or a degree, you don't sit down and say, I'm going to do a 4-year degree today. You sit down and say, these are the classes I'm taking this semester, and here's what the schedule is. And you begin the process, all right? Do not bite off the whole world at one time. Begin at the beginning, chunk it out, and be a little bit patient. Okay, that's how you get the thing off the ground. You start at the beginning, you take it in chunks, set little goals, give yourself a break, all right? Don't overwhelm yourself. Don't feel this weird guilt of I'm not working hard enough. I'm not working hard enough if I don't spend 5 hours today writing songs. How fun does that sound? Or you can just feel the energy in my voice. That sounds swell. No. I'm going to spend 15 minutes today because I've been having a lot of trouble getting this going, and I'm intimidated and I'm worried and I'm questioning and I'm self-doubting. I'm going to spend 15 minutes with the guitar in my hand, and I'm going to pluck at some chords, and I'm going to see if anything comes out. And when that's done, I'm going to reward myself with a really nice coffee, and then I'm going to go about my day. Tomorrow, I'm going to do 15 minutes again. Same time, same station. don't try to write a double album in one sitting. You know what I mean? Chunk it, break it down, let the momentum gather. It was the same thing with this show. I canned some interviews. I worked on the audio long before I published anything. And then you get into the fun stuff. Oh, what's the art going to look like? Get Denny to help me with that. I'm a great starter of things. I really enjoy starting things. It's when you get into them and have to keep them going that I begin to run into problems. That's why I've got like 100 pages of 7 different novels that I never finished. Great at the beginning. That's my own peccadillo. Maybe you're a middle person. I don't know. But once you get it off the ground, don't overwhelm yourself with volume, okay? Take it in chunks. Little pieces. Celebrate your wins. Build that momentum. Little achievable goals will pull you along. Okay, if you had told me 6 years ago, this week, by the way, you're going to produce 219 episodes, I would have fallen over. Just because, where the hell am I going to get that from? Where am I going to get the content for what amounts to close to 219, probably 200 hours of audio? That's overwhelming. You just fall over. It's like, I can't take that on. That's nuts. Can you take on 40 minutes a week of audio? Well, yeah, maybe. It's like, I can't write a whole album. Can you work for 15 minutes today and tomorrow? Oh, well, yeah. I can't write a whole book. Oh my God. Oh, what am I going to do? Can you write a paragraph today? That's it. Can you write a paragraph today? Oh, well, maybe. And a lot of times what will happen is you sit down to write that paragraph and you'll catch the flow. And all of a sudden you look up and you've written 2 or 3 pages. You're like, oh, wow, some output. And then it's amazing how it just skyrockets from there, right? The impetus, the momentum, the confidence, the energy, it all just kind of flows from there. But don't try to take on the whole world at once. One town at a time, man. So examine what fears may be holding you back and get serious about that. Get real about it, right? Don't deny. If you're afraid of success, inquire. If you fundamentally don't actually want to do that thing, that can be a hard thing to face, but face it, because you're just wasting time otherwise. And when you get through all that and you're ready to go, don't take on the whole world at once. Chunk it down, make it manageable, celebrate little wins, and let those milestones just pull you through, man. Just pull you through. I did not sit down to make 219 podcast episodes. I sat down to make one. Then I made another one. Then I made another one. Then all of a sudden, it's 6 bloody years later, 219 episodes, and wow, take it in little pieces, all right? I'm going to stop now because it's like sneaking up on an hour and I don't want to do that anymore, because now that I know how to edit, I got to edit all this. I'm not at a point where I can pay somebody to do it, and maybe I've been thinking about relaunching the Patreon. I've been thinking about a lot of stuff, and we'll see. Do I really want to do that? You know the process. Look, it's been 6 years, and that's a marvel to me. I know it feels like 2 of those years never happened. Like there's this weird time warp in the middle. I feel that. 6 years ago, the world was very different, and here we are. And here we are. And this show has changed dramatically. The way I present it, what it's about. Some people have come and gone along the way. I want to thank those of you who have hung with me. I mean, a lot of you have been staunch supporters from moment one. All right. And it is not lost on me that you have done so. I deeply and genuinely appreciate all of the support for 6 years. All the people who have told me they listened, told me they enjoy it, told me they liked a particular episode, were moved by a particular episode, whether that's a guest episode or a solo episode that I did, people who have rolled with the different kind of experiments I've done with road-episodes and different sorts of things, histories. I know it's been a weird ride, and I wish it had been more consistent. I have my regrets about this thing, but it's trial and error, you know. I'm not a person who tends to go into things with a plan, so maybe I'm not the person to listen to when it comes to getting a thing off the ground, but actually I am, because I do get things off the ground. They tend to be off the ground a little bit wobbly, but they are off the ground. So if you're not getting anything off the ground at all, you know, get them off wobbly at least. I'm good at that. It's been an interesting ride. It's been incredibly edifying. It's been incredibly frustrating. It's just been this thing that exists. And I feel as though the podcast is just kind of part of my everyday existence now. And I hope that you can draw some inspiration from the fact that this thing exists and it's gotten better. It's gotten so much better. Even if my format now isn't the way you prefer it, maybe you like conversations, maybe you like histories, whatever. I know that my ability to produce this thing has gotten better. I know that my delivery of it has gotten better. I've picked up so much confidence from it that shows up in other parts of my life. And I'm really pleased by that. I haven't really reckoned with that. But my encouragement to all of you is, in particular, those things that won't go away. Those things that just won't go away. Whatever they are, pay attention to that. This podcast kicked around for years in my head before I actually sat down to do it. It just never went away. And if you've got that going on in your life, especially if you are a person who is frustrated, if you feel like you're not doing anything or you don't give a crap about what you do, your job is not fulfilling and you wish you had something else, you do have something else. I don't know what it is, but I bet you do. And it's probably been hanging around for a long time. And for all of the reasons that I just talked about, maybe you haven't gotten down to it. Well, this is my encouragement. Get down to it. Because I say this often on the program. We need you. We need the best of you. And the best of you, in many cases, exists and will be expressed by that thing that won't go away. Thank you, thank you, thank you for 6 years and 219 episodes of listening to this thing. If you want to give me an anniversary present, you can buy a t-shirt, john-huff.com/shop. You could buy a mug. You could leave me a rating and review on Apple or Spotify. I would dearly appreciate that. Or just a little note that says, congratulations. I always appreciate that too. Maybe I'll even publish some of those if they come my way. I do appreciate all of you. I am going to shutting up because I got to get to pickleball, kids. The wheel keeps on turning. I will be back next week with something. Fare thee well, Frank the Cat. Good things, dude. If you take nothing else from 219 episodes of this thing, from all the guests I've had on, good things happen when you put yourself out there. So stop hesitating. Let's go. Let's put ourselves out there. Let's make this bananas booby hatchery world a better place for everyone. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm going to shutting up, except to say, hey, kids, I'll check you later. Yeah. I don't know what to sing for an anniversary. Happy birthday song? You say it's your birthday. It doesn't feel right.